So the other day I was at Walmart and I came across these speakers that were super cheap and I had to pick them up. Now, I know what you're thinking, they're gonna sound terrible, they're from Walmart. I tend to agree with you, but they're not going into a show vehicle, they're just going into my rock crawler. So they don't need to be great. We actually have no speakers in there right now at all. So the brand is Scotch or Scotch something. And it's just a little tiny head unit here, stereo deck, whatever you want to call it. I got some 6.5-inch speakers and I got some 4-inch speakers for the dash. And that's going to replace what's in here at the moment, which is this. We got nothing at all. As you can see, the previous owner completely removed the factory stereo plug by means of force. It looks like they just ripped it out. And we have no wiring to either dash speaker. And as you see, they just cut 6.5-inch holes in the door. This is not work that I did. The lift and everything else that makes this truck badass is the work that I did. This is not the work of RM Garage. Anyway, let's get started. So this is the stereo here, and as you can see, it's kind of a shallow unit. It doesn't go back very far, and it mounts on my Toyota just by bending these little mounting tabs backwards to pinch it up against this plastic trim. And let's see some of the cool features of this stereo. It has USB input. Apparently it only plays MP3s. It completely disregards WAV and other audio file types. Has a 3.5mm auxiliary input. It supports the iPlug Smart Remote app, 200 watts, and they really want you to know that it does not have a CD player. All I really care about is the fact that it accepts Bluetooth, has an auxiliary port, and can apparently charge my phone. So from that point, we're good. One more thing worth mentioning is that you seemingly can't remove the faceplate from this. There's no button to pop it up and release it unless it's something with these tabs on the side and you just kind of rip this thing out of there. But I can't find a way to remove this faceplate, so it's staying in there for good. So here are the 6.5-inch speakers. I'm not gonna lie, this looks really cheap, but what can you expect for a $25 pair of 6.5-inch speakers? They come with this little black felt pad, which I'm assuming you're supposed to remove. And then this, of course, just is a grill guard or whatever for the front of the speaker, and it just bolts on like that. So the first thing that I'm gonna take care of is the wiring harness for the stereo itself. I'm gonna have to wire this directly into my factory wiring where the plug was, because as you saw, the previous owners just cut everything out. Normally, this just wires into a piggyback, and that piggyback plug then plugs into your factory plug in your car. I'd recommend using that. They're really cheap. They're like $10, and it will prevent you from having to mess with your factory wiring. So I'm gonna start by wiring up the constant 12 volt, the switched 12 volt, and the ground. And the reason why I know that's what those wires are is because it has an instruction manual that tells you where these wires are supposed to go. And as for finding the constant 12 volt and switched 12 volt wires in the vehicle, it's actually not too difficult as long as yours isn't hacked up like this. But I can tell you just from probing these wires with a multimeter that the gray wire is the switched 12 volt and this blue and yellow wire is the constant 12 volt. With the ground, switched 12 volt, and constant hooked up, we can now do our first test, which is to see if the radio even turns on. Don't crucify me over not soldering this. I will solder it. You can see there's already heat shrink on the wires, ready to go for once it's soldered. And as you can see, it does. Now, I'm not surprised this works. When you buy something, it should work, but just a good check before we move forward. So we're good to go. Let's go ahead and get all the speakers hooked up. Well, the stereo is installed and the speakers are installed too. There's a speaker in each door and then there's a speaker in the dash corner on each side as well. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking that this stereo is definitely not installed. It's just hanging there by the wires. And the reason it's hanging there is because it has some issues and it actually sounds great. But unfortunately, that does not take away from the downsides. This unit is getting so damn hot, you can barely even touch it. And that doesn't give me much confidence when I look through the reviews of this unit and see that for other people, this thing has actually caught on fire. Another thing is that it's not shutting off when the car is turned off. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It kind of gets stuck in this little reboot loop. Already tried resetting the stereo. Makes no difference at all. And the last thing that I've noticed is that sometimes this thing causes the speakers to kind of crackle and pop. And I know that it's the stereo and not the speakers because the speakers all have new wiring ran to this harness here. So there's definitely something going on with the stereo, and to fix it, I've ordered a new one. And this here is the new stereo that we're going to be using. It's still a pretty cheap one. You can pick it up around 30 to 40 bucks. My current thoughts on the Walmart setup is that the speakers are actually really good. I'm thoroughly impressed with the speakers. However, the stereo is not good. So if you're going to go this route, I recommend using a different stereo other than the dual one that you can buy for $21 from Walmart that we were using. So as you guys can see, we got the new stereo installed, and like I assumed, the previous stereo was causing the issues that I was experiencing. So I still recommend the speakers. They honestly sound really good for how cheap they are. I do not recommend the stereo. I recommend you use a different one, maybe like this one here. This one seems to work just fine, and honestly, the sound quality, it's great. All right, guys, well, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Really need to get a new headliner in this thing. This is not looking good. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I normally focus more on the mechanical side of things. However, we've been wheeling this truck for a while now with no stereo whatsoever. We've been using one of those little like JBL pill speaker things. It just sounds absolutely terrible on the trail. So figured it was time for an audio upgrade. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.